Hi, welcome to Global Supply Chain Week. I'm JT Engstrom with FreightWaves. Joining me today is Jeff McDermott, SVP of Transportation Management at Geodis. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, JT. Great to be here.
Yeah, and Happy New Year, relatively. I know we spoke back in December, so it's good to have turned the page and kicked off the year. Excited to talk about some of the things you saw during peak season, and then outline some expectations for where we are now and kind of the year to come. So that'll be great.
Yeah, definitely. 2020 was a interesting year to say the least, and you think you have a moment to catch your breath, but here we are in February, preparing for the next peak season already.
That's right. That's right. And so, for benefit of the audience, can we first start off with talking a little bit about your background and how you got into the role you are now?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, for those that don't know, Geodis is a global third-party logistics company. And we provide services in areas such as value added warehousing, freight forwarding, and transportation management for our customers. So in North America, as an example, we operate over 50 million square feet of warehouse space, with a large portion of that in the e-commerce fulfillment direct to consumer space. So, as an example, last peak season, there's about a 10-day window where we shipped over 10 million packages direct to consumer. So, definitely been exciting given the year we just came from. A little bit about myself. I've worked for Geodis for about 11 years. I oversee and run our transportation division here in the U.S. I have over 27 years experience in supply chain, primarily in the 3PL space, and started my career early in the days working on the carrier side.
Yeah, that's great. That's a tremendous background, and certainly will provide us some pretty rich content for our discussion around things that have materialized. Can we talk a little bit about peak season this past year, how it built up, how it performed, and anything that surprised you, perhaps above and beyond the realization that this past peak season was on the back of 2020, which, as everyone knows, was a very unique year from a transportation point of view.
Yeah, well, we knew peak 2020 was going to be probably the toughest one we had ever experienced, and from a transportation perspective, the carriers we work with started coming to us in early summer and really messaging that you need to start preparing now, and you need to get the message out to your shippers that we work with, to be prepared, because if you did not prepare and and get ready for all the challenges, you're probably going to be disappointed in getting your product to your customers in time. So we got actively involved. We started messaging out to our customers, and I think that many of those that prepared well actually made some changes. Right, they started looking at strategies to run some of their sales and holiday promotions earlier in the peak season, instead of just waiting for that traditional Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. And that was very those companies actually fared better. For those that really went into the peak season kind of business as usual, and the notion that parcel capacity was unlimited, they're the ones that face a lot more challenges for sure. And I think when you look back, in spite of things, the parcel carriers actually performed remarkably well, given all the challenges and volume at unprecedented levels that they had to deal with.
Yeah, that's an interesting behavioral change amongst or at least a segment of the shipper and carrier, parcel carrier capacity side of the equation. Do you think some of those practices will continue on throughout the coming quarters and years, given the realization that both e-commerce has taken a stair step level up in growth, and that we might be in somewhat of a net new normal, at least for a transitory period of time?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because as we all know, the consumer buying habits have changed. We all know the younger generation were buying a lot of their goods and products online, but I think with COVID, it brought in a lot of the older generation that may have been used to going to the retail store, but now they realize the convenience of online shopping as well. So, when you look at the new year that we're in, if we are seeing many companies coming to us saying, we either need to enhance our e-commerce strategy, or maybe some of them may not have really been playing in that space, and they're now really looking to amp up their direct to consumer. But everything we're hearing out there is that e-commerce is going to continue to grow, which means more and more challenges for that final mile delivery for the parcel carriers.
Yeah, certainly. And that final mile delivery piece of the equation has really exploded throughout 2020. I mean, there was a clear secular trend that was growing prior to 2020. But final mile carriers did really well throughout the year, and the expectation is that that trend will continue. How do you think the capacity side of the equation will deal with that increased demand? Do you think we'll see new operating practices? Do you think we might see some new logos? Do you think we'll see traditional players, perhaps not as focused in the final mile space, starting to roll out new initiatives, offerings, and divisions?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think the big parcel carriers were expecting the volumes we saw in 2020, but they didn't expect it to show up until 2025, right? So they all had their capital investment plans in place, and I think what you're going to see is that many of them are going to accelerate that. They're going to definitely work to expand and drive efficiencies in their network. They're going to definitely be focused on how do they deal with the residential delivery more and more efficiently, because you lose a lot of that density, as we all know, when you're delivering to a home versus to businesses. I also think that the carriers have a little bit of the upper hand here, so they're going to be more selective around the business they choose. So some of this big and bulky items and things that may not be attractive from a parcel carrier's perspective, they may need to find another mode, to get delivered, LTL or maybe even something different. But so I think that they're going to be selective, and I also think that it will be interesting on some of the pricing strategies that the carriers take. Are they going to take some different approaches to try to incentivize shipper behavior? One thing as you think about as well is just even simple packaging, right? There's a big difference between shipping a box out that's got nice branded marketing material versus the poly bag, which may not be as attractive, when the consumer receives it. But there's a big difference in shipping bags versus boxes when you think about cube it takes up on a truck. So I think the shippers and the carriers are going to have to continue to work together to deal with this volumes in the most efficient manners. But I also believe there's going to be some acceleration with different carriers out there. The regional carriers and some of the carriers that leverage the post office for final mile delivery. We saw them step up and take a lot of the volume in 2020, and I think that will continue as they grow and expand their networks as well.
Yeah, that's really unique and interesting commentary, and there was a lot of great commentary regarding the carrier capacity provisioning side of the equation, which I think is a really important element to think about. On the other side of the equation, can we talk about some of the behaviors you would recommend to shippers to ensure that they're prepared for this year's coming peak season, not just for 2021, but also to set up structural practices to ensure that they're prepared for many peak seasons to come, realizing that this element of the space is going to continue to explode and evolve?
Yeah, I think that shippers need to change the mindset a little bit. When you think about parcel, it was always about negotiate the best rates you can and give all your volume to one carrier so you can get attractive volume discounts and incentives. But now that capacity's entered the game, I think that shippers need to consider more of a multi-carrier solution. And I know that here at Geodis, we've been using that model for years. And this last peak season, it helped benefit us because we were able to spread volumes around to different carriers. And if one carrier was struggling in one market, we could make a shift to try to alleviate some pressure there. So I think it's going to be a little bit hard for companies to say, well, I may not get as good of rates, but I have to spread my volumes around just to make sure that that capacity is there. And that's not an easy task because in the world of parcel, when you think about all the integration from a system standpoint and labels and consumer tracking and all those things, it takes a little time to prepare for that to get the carriers added, especially in the highly automated facilities where you're sorting packages automatically by carrier and those type of things. So, but I believe that you're gonna see a lot of companies look at that. And last year when they tried to do it last minute, a lot of the carriers said no, we just don't have the capacity to take any excess volume from you. And I think you can see a lot of shippers look at that here early this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that outlines a really unique element of this subsector is given the outpaced growth in the e-commerce world and also the assets required to actually deliver these final mile goods, it would seem like there would be, until the market stabilizes at a more normal growth rate, a continued and persistent capacity challenge, certainly at least in peak season. Given that, do you have any predictions on what may be in store to help support this differential, prior to hitting that maturity phase, if you will, to ensure that capacity is, if not appropriately matching up with demand, then at least being maximizing asset utilization and trying to ensure target service levels?
Yeah, I think you know one thing that if you look at what happens kind of in a European model is the notion of these access points, right? So where you have a facility that's in a neighborhood where somebody goes down to the access point and they may pick up 10 different packages, right? Versus 10 different deliveries coming to your house, right? So and all of that is around building the density, right? Building density for the delivery for those carriers and best utilizing those assets. So that could be one idea that we hear a lot from the carriers out there that they're trying to promote and push is build that density that way. I also think that you always hear chatter about one of the large e-com retailers out there who is also doing home delivery, possibly getting into that carrier game where they could actually potentially use some of their assets to deliver their other packages other than their own, and that would be an interesting thing to see how that develops. But I also think you think about this whole holiday peak season. It's just we've just built so much around supply chain and the costs and everything around that whole season. It gets back to what I said earlier. Does some of that need to change where that season is maybe spread out a little bit? Because putting so much during one time of the year is just so difficult to manage.
Yeah, yeah, and on the capacity side, it's always it's challenging to build the cathedral for Sunday, right? From an asset intensity point of view, because it results in relatively low asset utilization for other periods of time, and so there's this constant struggle of variation in demand. You mentioned one or more large e-com retailers building out their own base load capacity base. Do you think that will become more common in standard practice? Do you think that might be a one-off? How do you think about that on a go-forward basis?
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult as we all know, and but there is, you see time to time there's a lot of investment money starting to enter this space around final mile delivery. So I think there's going to be some money that's going to start chasing that, which gives some more of these regional delivery companies some money to invest in the capital that you need to operate these complex networks. So I would think that would happen more than. I mean, you really have to be a very large retailer with a lot of scale to get into this to get into the final mile delivery game, because it's a challenge for sure.
Absolutely. And I think both e-commerce and final mile, and clearly both of those being interrelated, are well positioned to be very attractive sectors for growth over the coming years, and that's super exciting. I think with that, do you have any final thoughts on your outlook for the combination of e-commerce and final mile over the next 2 to 3, 4 years, and what your expectations might be?
Yeah, nothing but growth. Like I said, consumers, I mean, or the companies that we deal with, they're all about growing their e-commerce, trying to get products to their consumers faster, trying to put distribution centers that are a little bit more forward to the population areas so that they can offer that rapid transit time. Um, so definitely, and just really being more um, strategic, like I said, from a parcel transportation standpoint. It isn't all about just cheap costs and free shipping. It's all about, how do we get the capacity to get our product there when they need it, and not create that dissatisfaction with the consumer.
No, I think that's right, and I think it's a great end market to be exposed to. It's a great position to be having a service offering into, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch, in a great market segment to benefit from going into the future. So with that, we're closing out. Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to see you and have you on join us for Global Supply Chain Week, and we'll look forward to having you join us again soon.
Thanks, JT. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, so with that, Jeff McDermott, SVP Transportation Management at Geodis, thank you again. I'm JT Engstrom with FreightWaves. Have a great day.